Marcus Webb had restored hundreds of antique photographs in his Charleston studio, but none had ever made his skin crawl quite like this one. The October afternoon light filtered through his workshop windows as he positioned the 1904 bridal portrait under his high-resolution scanner. The image showed a young woman in an elaborate wedding gown, her smile radiant, her pose perfect. It was standard Victorian bridal photography, except for the bouquet she held. Marcus had initially purchased the photograph for $50 at an estate sale on King Street. Drawn by the exceptional quality of the original print from Beaumont and Sterling, one of Charleston's most prestigious studios, he planned to restore and resell it, a routine project. But when the digital scan appeared on his monitor at 1200 dpi, something caught his eye. Between the white roses and lilies of the bride's bouquet, partially obscured by the flowers and greenery, are objects that did not belong. They were small, metallic, and deliberately positioned. Marcus zoomed in, his pulse quickening. Silver thimbles, 3 of them nestled among the blooms, their surfaces reflecting the studio's light in ways that created dark spots, stains perhaps, or something worse. His hand trembled as he adjusted the contrast and brightness. The thimbles became clearer. Each bore visible marks on their surfaces, scratches or possibly engravings. And those dark stains were not photographic artifacts or age damage. They were there in 1904, captured by the camera. Marcus pulled out his jeweler's loupe and examined the original photograph directly. The thimbles were definitely present, though barely visible to the naked eye without magnification. Someone had hidden them deliberately, tucking them deep within the bouquet's arrangement. He flipped the photograph over. At the back in faded brown ink was written Alice Hamilton, May 14, 1904. Beaumont and Sterling Studio, Charleston. Wedding day portrait. Marcus opened his laptop and searched Alice Hamilton, Charleston, 1904 wedding. The first result made his blood run cold. A digitized newspaper headline from the Charleston News and Courier dated May 17, 1904. Bride vanishes on wedding day. Groom found dead. The Charleston County Public Library's microfilm room was quiet, except for the mechanical hum of the reader as Marcus scrolled through newspapers from May 1904. His hands were unsteady as he located the Charleston News and Courier archives. The headline appeared on May 17, 1904, 3 days after the wedding portrait was taken. Tragedy strikes prominent Charleston family. Bride disappears hours before ceremony. Groom discovered deceased. Marcus read the article carefully. The wedding of Miss Alice Hamilton, 23, daughter of the late shipping merchant Robert Hamilton, to Mr. Henry Dawson, 34, proprietor of Dawson Import Company, was to take place yesterday at Street Phillips Church. Miss Hamilton was last seen at 8 o'clock in the morning at her residence on Meeting Street, fully dressed in her bridal attire. When the carriage arrived at 10 o'clock in the morning to transport her to the church, she had vanished. More disturbingly, Mr. Dawson was found unconscious in his rooms at the Charleston Hotel on Sunday evening, May 15th. Despite the efforts of Dr. William Thornton, Mr. Dawson expired Monday morning. Dr. Thornton reports the symptoms suggest poisoning, though the exact substance remains undetermined. Marcus's mouth went dry. He continued reading. Miss Hamilton's whereabouts remain unknown. Police Chief Samuel Porter states that Miss Hamilton is wanted for questioning regarding Mr. Dawson's death. Her personal effects were found at her residence, including her wedding dress, but the young woman has vanished entirely. A follow-up article from May 20th provided more details. Investigation reveals Mr. Dawson consumed tea delivered to his hotel room on Saturday afternoon, May 14th, the same day of the wedding portrait sitting. The tea was reportedly sent by his bride-to-be as a gift. The silver tea service has been seized as evidence. Marcus sat back, his mind racing. Alice had her wedding portrait taken on May 14th. That same day, she sent poison tea to her fiancé. He died the next day. She had disappeared before the wedding, and she had hidden thimbles, possibly containing the poison, in her bouquet during the portrait session. She documented her crime, Marcus whispered aloud. She left evidence in plain sight. But why? Marcus stood outside the ruins of what had once been the Hamilton residence on Meeting Street. The property had been abandoned for decades. The house was demolished in the 1960s, replaced now by a small parking lot. Only a historical marker remained. Site of Hamilton House, built 1798, demolished 1963. He had spent the morning at the Charleston Historical Society, researching the Hamilton family. Robert Hamilton, Alice's father, had been a wealthy shipping merchant who died suddenly in 1902, leaving his entire estate to his only daughter. Alice had been 21, unmarried and suddenly very wealthy. The society's artist, an elderly woman named Dorothy, had been intrigued by Marcus's question. The Hamilton case was Charleston's greatest mystery, she said, peeling dusty boxes from storage. Alice was never found. Some believed she drowned herself in the harbor out of guilt. Others thought she fled north under an assumed name. What about her fiancé Henry Dawson? Marcus asked. Dorothy's expression darkened. What is very that's complicated? Come look at this. She spread out documents on the research table. Business records, legal papers, letters. Henry Dawson began courting Alice in late 1902, shortly after her father's death. They became engaged within 6 months. But look at these business records from 1903. Marcus examined the papers. They showed that Henry Dawson had been Robert Hamilton's business partner. and that there were significant discrepancies in the company accounts around the time of Robert's death. "Oh, are you saying Henry might have embezzled from Alice's father?" Marcus asked. "More than that," Dorothy said quietly. "There were rumors, never proven, that Robert Hamilton's death was not natural. He collapsed suddenly at age 48, previously healthy. The symptoms his doctor recorded sound remarkably similar to what killed Henry Dawson." Marcus felt his understanding shift. Alice suspected Henry killed her father. She was gathering evidence, and when she realized she could not prove it legally, Dorothy continued, she decided to take justice into her own hands. The wedding was scheduled. She had access to him. She made her choice. "But the portrait," Marcus said. "Why hide the thimble in her bouquet?" Dorothy smiled grimly. "That is what you need to figure out, Mr. Webb." Alice Hamilton was an educated woman. If she left a message, she meant for someone to find it eventually. Marcus returned to his studio with photocopies of every document Dorothy had provided. He spread them across his work table alongside the wedding portrait, studying Alice's face with new understanding. Her smile was not joyful. It was defiant. Her eyes held something complex. Determination, sadness, and a hint of satisfaction. This was not a woman celebrating her wedding day. This was a woman who had made a terrible decision and wanted the truth preserved somehow. He zoomed in on the thimbles again. 3 silver thimbles partially visible among the roses and lilies. Why thimbles specifically? Why 3? Marcus searched online for thimbles 1904 Charleston and found several historical references. Thimbles were common sewing implements, usually made of brass, steel, or silver for wealthy families. They were often given as gifts, sometimes engraved with initials or dates. Then he found something interesting. A reference to poison rings and concealment devices in Victorian-era jewelry and accessories. Small containers disguised as ordinary objects, hollow rings, lockets, even thimbles used to carry various substances. She used them to transport the poison, Marcus murmured. "But why photograph them?" He looked at the documents again, particularly a letter he had found in the archives. Correspondence between Alice and her father's buyer, dated March 1904, 2 months before the wedding. "Dear Mr. Patterson, I write to inquire whether new evidence regarding my father's estate and his business partnership with Mr. Dawson might warrant further investigation. I have discovered certain irregularities in the accounts which suggest impropriety. However, I understand that without substantial proof, legal action would be impossible. I remain your servant, Alice Hamilton." The lawyer's response was formal and discouraging. Insufficient evidence, too much time elapsed, no legal recourse available. Alice had tried the proper channels. The law could not help her. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Dorothy at the Historical Society. "The thimbles, could they have belonged to Alice's mother? Family heirlooms. Alice's mother died in childbirth when Alice was born," Dorothy replied. "That yes, there would have been personal effects. Let me check the estate inventory from Robert Hamilton's will." 10 minutes later, Dorothy called back. "Found it. Among the items bequeathed to Alice, silver sewing kit, including 3 engraved thimbles. Property of the late Catherine Hamilton." Marcus's heart raced. Her mother's thimbles. She used her mother's thimbles to poison the man who killed her father. Poetic justice, Dorothy said quietly. Or perhaps she wanted her mother's memory involved. Witness to the act. Lomont and Sterling Photography Studio had operated in Charleston from 1895 to 1928. The building still stood on Broad Street, now converted to condominiums, but Marcus learned that the studio's business records had been donated to the South Carolina Historical Society in Columbia. He made the 2-hour drive on a dry November morning, arriving at the archives when they opened. The collection occupied 3 large boxes, appointment books, client ledgers, and correspondence spanning 3 decades. Marcus found the entry for May 14, 1904. Hamilton Alice. Bridal portrait. 2 t.m. appointment. Special request. Client provided on bouquet. Payment $15. Notes. Subject arrived alone. No family present. Session duration 45 minutes. Prints ready May 16th. The notation client provided on bouquet stood out. Standard practice was for the studio to supply flowers or for families to bring them, but Alice had specifically brought her own arrangement, the one containing the hidden thimbles. Marcus found another entry that made him pause. 2 days earlier, May 12th, another appointment. Dawson Henry. Individual portrait. Request formal sitting for wedding announcement. Payment $10. He requested that photograph from the archives. 8 minutes later, the librarian brought it. A formal portrait of Henry Dawson, showing a stern-faced man in his 30s with pulled eyes and a calculating expression. Even in the photograph, Marcus sensed something predatory about him. But what caught his attention was the background. Barely visible on a table beside Henry was a small silver tea service, the same one mentioned in the newspapers containing the poison. Marcus's hands shook as he examined the image more closely. The tea service was ornate, engraved, clearly expensive, and in the original newspaper description it was noted as being sent by the bride to her groom as a gift. He cross-referenced the dates. Henry's portrait, May 12th. Alice's portrait, May 14th. Henry received the tea, May 14th. Henry died May 15th. Alice had seen Henry's portrait, perhaps even visited the studio to view it before her own session. She had seen that tea service he valued, and she had used it to deliver the poison. She planned everything, Marcus whispered, bound to the smallest detail, and she photographed her confession. But one question remained. Where did Alice go after the wedding day? Marcus spent days searching for any trace of Alice Hamilton after May 1904. The police investigation had been extensive, but ultimately fruitless. She had vanished completely, leaving behind her belongings, her fortune, everything. At the Charleston Police Department's Historical Records Division, Officer Jennifer Torres helped him access the original case files, now digitized. The Hamilton case is legendary here, she said, pulling up scanned documents. Every few years, someone gets interested and tries to solve it. The investigation report was thorough. Police had searched the harbor, interviewed every servant and acquaintance, checked train and ship passenger lists. Alice Hamilton had disappeared as if she had never existed. That one detail caught Marcus's attention. A statement from Alice's lady's maid, Emma Patterson, given May 18, 1904. This Alice was different in the weeks before the wedding. Quiet, focused. She spent hours in her father's study going through his papers. She asked me strange questions about Mr. Doston when he visited, what he discussed with Mr. Hamilton before the master's death. She seemed to be searching for something. On May 13th, the day before the portrait sitting, Miss Alice gave me a sealed letter and instructed me to post it on May 16th, regardless of what happened. She said it was important. I posted it as requested. The address was to a Mr. Jonathan Hamilton in Philadelphia. Marcus's pulse quickened. A letter to Philadelphia posted after the wedding day. Who was Jonathan Hamilton? Officer Torres searched genealogical databases. Here. Jonathan Hamilton, Robert Hamilton's younger brother, who moved to Philadelphia in 1895 to establish a shipping office there. He died in 1911. Do you have records of what was in the letter? No, but Torres paused, typing rapidly. The police did interview Jonathan Hamilton in June 1904. Let me find that report. The interview transcript appeared on screen. Jonathan had been questioned about his niece's whereabouts. His response, I have not seen Alice since her father's funeral in 1902. I received correspondence from her recently, but it contained only personal family matters. Nothing relevant to your investigation. Marcus leaned back. Jonathan was lying to protect Alice. The letter had contained her confession, her evidence, maybe her plans. And Jonathan, knowing the truth, had helped her disappear. Philadelphia, Marcus murmured. She went to her uncle. She escaped. Marcus took the train to Philadelphia, carrying copies of all his research and the restored wedding portrait. The Pennsylvania Historical Society occupied a beautiful building on Locust Street, its archives containing records dating back to colonial times. The genealogy specialist, an enthusiastic young man named David, helped in search for any trace of Alice Hamilton, or variations of her name arriving in Philadelphia in 1904. They found nothing under Alice Hamilton. That David suggested searching differently. If she was hiding, she would change her name. Let us look for single women arriving from Charleston in May or June 1904, around age 23. The search yielded dozens of possibilities. Marcus felt discouraged until David said, try searching for women connected to Jonathan Hamilton's household. Servants, employees, family members. That is when they found it. City directory listings for 1905 showed Jonathan Hamilton's household on Rittenhouse Square included Catherine Harris' companion. The age matched, approximately 24. The timing matched. She appeared in records starting mid-1904. Catherine Harris, Marcus said slowly. Her mother's name was Catherine. She took her mother's first name and created a new identity. David pulled up more records. Catherine Harris appeared in Philadelphia directories until 1911, always listed at Jonathan Hamilton's address. Then after Jonathan's death, she moved to a separate residence on Spruce Street. She worked as a private secretary, lived quietly, and appeared in census records through 1950. She lived until 1950, Marcus asked, astonished. Catherine Harris died at age 69 in Philadelphia, never married. Left her estate to various charities supporting women's education and orphanages. Marcus felt a strange mixture of emotions. Alice had escaped, built a new life, lived 46 years after her crime. She had been neither caught nor punished, but had she been free? David pulled up one more document, Catherine Harris's obituary from a small Philadelphia newspaper. It was brief, mentioning her charitable work and quiet life, but one line stood out. Miss Harris was known for her extensive collection of antique photographs and her support of women seeking justice from impossible situations. He never forgot, Marcus said quietly. She spent her life helping other women escape. And she kept that wedding portrait, David added. Somehow it ended up back in Charleston after her death. Maybe she sent it back deliberately, knowing someday someone might understand. Back in Charleston, Marcus arranged to meet with Dr. Patricia Morrison, a forensic historian at the Medical University of South Carolina who specialized in historical poisoning cases. He brought the high-resolution scans of the wedding portrait, focusing on the thimbles. Dr. Morrison examined the images with professional interest, using specialized software to enhance the details. The staining on these symbols is consistent with certain lethal compounds used in the early 1900s, she said. Arsenic was common, but the dark coloration suggests something else. What else was available in 1904? Marcus asked. Cyanide compounds derived from various sources. Certain plant extracts. Strychnine. She zoomed in further. But look here. See these tiny scratches on the surface of each symbol? Both are not random. Marcus leaned closer. The scratches formed patterns. Letters, he realized. Deliberate engravings, microscopic but intentional. Dr. Molitor enhanced the contrast. The letters became visible. On the first symbol RH, on the second, CH, on the third, AH Robert Hamilton, Catherine Hamilton, Alice Hamilton. Marcus breathed. Her father, her mother, herself. 3 generations. 3 symbols. She marked them, Dr. Morrison said. She turned her mother's possessions into instruments of justice, literally engraving her family's identity into them. This was not just revenge, it was a statement. Marcus thought about the wedding portrait, a bin. Alice standing there in her bridal gown, smiling, holding a bouquet that contained her family silver thimbles filled with poison, photographed as evidence of what she was about to do. She created a confession, Marcus said. Not for the police, but for history. She knew she would disappear, that people would wonder what happened. She left this portrait as proof not to be caught, but to be understood. Dr. Morrison nodded. In 1904, a woman could not testify against her husband in court in no states. She had no legal recourse. If Henry Dawson had killed her father, and was about to marry her to secure the Hamilton fortune, the law would not protect her. So she protected herself. Marcus finished. And documented it in the only way she could, through a photograph that would survive long after she was gone. The question is, Dr. Morrison said, what are you going to do with this information? Marcus spent sleepless nights wrestling with what he had discovered. He had solved the mystery of the bride's bouquet, understood Alice's motive, found evidence of her escape and her new life. But what was his responsibility now? He invited Dorothy from the Historical Society and Officer Torres from the Police Department to his studio. He needed perspective, needed to hear from people who understood Charleston's history and its relationship with justice. He presented everything. The newspaper articles, the business records showing Henry's embezzlement, the evidence suggesting he had poisoned Robert Hamilton, Alice's desperate attempt to seek legal help, her ultimate decision to poison him and disappear, and her carefully documented confession hidden in her wedding portrait. Dorothy spoke first. Alice Hamilton was failed by every system meant to protect her. Her father was murdered, his fortune stolen, and she was expected to marry the man responsible. In 1904, women could not vote, could not serve on juries, had limited legal rights. What choice did she have? Officer Torres was more conflicted. Murder is murder, regardless of motive or circumstance. But this happened 120 years ago. Everyone involved is dead. There is no case to prosecute, no justice to serve in the legal sense. But there is historical justice, Marcus said. The truth matters, does it not? Alice left this portrait because she wanted the truth known eventually. Then tell it, Dorothy said. But tell it completely. Tell her story, not just the crime. Explain what drove her to it. Give her the voice she never had. Marcus considered this. The portrait belongs in a museum. The story belongs in the historical record. But I want to do it right, not as a sensationalized mystery, but as a case study of a woman trapped by her era's limitations who made an impossible choice. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked with Dorothy to prepare a complete historical presentation. They gathered all the evidence, created a timeline, and wrote a comprehensive analysis that did not shy away from the crime, but contextualized it within the severe limitations faced by women in 1904. They donated the portrait to the Charleston Museum along with all the documentation. The museum agreed to display it with the full story. Alice's investigation of her father's death, the evidence of Henry's crimes, her failed attempts at legal recourse, and finally her decision to poison him and disappear. Justice delayed. The Alice Hamilton case became a traveling exhibition, sparking conversations about historical crimes, women's rights, and the complex nature of justice when legal systems fail. Marcus gave a lecture at the museum's opening. He spoke about finding the portrait, discovering its secret, and the moral questions it raised. He ended with this. Alice Hamilton committed a crime, but she was also a victim of her father's murder, of a legal system that offered her no protection, of a society that would have forced her to marry her father's stealer. Her portrait is not a celebration of murder. It is a document of desperation and a reminder that justice is not always found in courtrooms. 6 months after the exhibition opened, Marcus received an unexpected email from a woman named Elizabeth Morrison in Philadelphia. The subject line read, "My great-grandmother was Catherine Harris." Marcus's hands shook as he opened it. "Dear Miss Carwed, I recently visited the Charleston Museum and saw your exhibition about Alice Hamilton. I need to tell you something that has been a family secret for 4 generations. Catherine Harris was my great-grandmother, and I had always known she was really Alice Hamilton from Charleston. My grandmother, Catherine's adopted daughter, was told the truth before Catherine died in 1950. Catherine wanted someone to know her real story, that only after enough time had passed. She gave my grandmother a letter to be opened after her death, explaining everything. She also left something else, the original sketches she made of those silver thimbles before she hid them in her bouquet. She documented everything. Marcus arranged to meet Elizabeth in Philadelphia. She brought a small wooden box that had belonged to Catherine Harris, Alice Hamilton. Inside were letters, photographs, and the sketches Elizabeth had mentioned. The sketches were meticulous, detailed drawings of the three thimbles showing their engravings, with notes in Alice's handwriting explaining their significance. There was also a letter written in 1949, a year before Alice's death. To whoever finds this, my name was Alice Hamilton. I was born in Charleston in 1881. In 1904, I poisoned the man who murdered my father and planned to steal everything he had built. I am not sorry for what I did, though I have lived with the weight of it every day since. I left Charleston with nothing but my mother's thimbles and the truth. I built a new life in Philadelphia, lived quietly, and tried to do good where I could. I helped women escape violent situations. I funded education for girls who had none. I hope that counts for something. I commissioned that wedding portrait knowing I would hide the thimble in my bouquet. I wanted there to be evidence, proof that I had existed, that my father had existed, that what happened to us mattered. I thought if someone found it decades later, they might understand. I was 23 years old and I had no one to help me. The law could not protect me. The society expected me to marry my father's murderer and smiled about it. I chose differently. I chose to survive. I hope whoever reads this understands that sometimes there were no good choices, only impossible ones. And we do the best we can with what we have. Marcus read the letter 3 times, tears blurring his vision. Elizabeth watched him quietly. What will you do with these? Marcus asked. Finally add them to your expedition, Elizabeth said. Alice wanted the truth known. She left that portrait as a message across time. You found it. You understood. Now finish telling her story. The expanded exhibition opened in spring 2025. The wedding portrait hung beside Alice's letter, the sketches of the thimbles and photographs of Catherine Harris in her later years, the quiet, dignified woman who had lived with the weight of an impossible choice. Marcus stood in the gallery during the opening, watching visitors study Alice's smiling face in that wonderful portrait. Seeing them notice the barely visible thimbles hidden among the roses and leaves. A young woman approached him. Do you think she was right to do it? Marcus considered the question carefully. I think she was trapped in an impossible situation. I think the systems that should have protected her failed completely. I think she made the only choice she felt she had. Whether it was right, that is something each person has to decide for themselves. The woman nodded, looking back at the portrait. She is brave, though, to leave that evidence, to want the truth known, even though it would condemn her. That takes courage. Marcus looked at Alice's face one more time. That enigmatic smile, those determined eyes, the bouquet held carefully in her hands, hiding its sinister secret. Yes, he agreed softly. That takes extraordinary courage. The portrait had looked peaceful, just a bright smile on her wedding day, but hidden among the flowers was a story of murder, justice, survival, and the lengths one woman went to reclaim her life when no one else would help her. And now, 120 years later, Alice Hamilton's truth was finally known.